To be a naturalist or an explorer, you don't need to be a professional athlete. You don't need specialized skills or expensive equipment, and you don't need to be super rich. All you really need is simple curiosity and the courage to see where it takes you. From your own backyards to the Boreal, Canada's nature is waiting to be explored, and the Great Trail is the perfect place to begin.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, the Great Trail, formerly called the Trans-Canada Trail, is the longest multi-use trail system in the world. It's a network of rail trails, pathways, greenways, waterways, and roads that connects over 15,000 communities across the country. The 24,000-kilometer trail, which stretches from east to west to north, supports a wide range of outdoor activities, from hiking and trail running, to cycling and cross-country skiing, to paddling and snowmobiling, to ATVing in some sections, and of course bird watching. Though most people don't realize it, the Great Trail is within 30 minutes of 80% of Canadians. This means that if you've ever walked a trail in your own community, it's likely you've already trekked along part of the Great Trail and been part of this journey. Now, most people are not crazy enough to walk the entire length of this 24,000-kilometer long trail. In fact, fewer people have completed the entire trail on foot than have gone to the moon. It's so large, according to Canadian Geographic, that if you started walking now, it would take you between 3 and 4 years to finish. That is, if you were to keep hiking at a brisk pace every day through every type of weather condition and during every season. To put this in perspective, when stretched out end to end, the Great Trail reaches almost 2/3 of the way around the globe. Walking its full length is equivalent to hiking the Appalachian Trail 7 times in a row, or walking along the Camino de Santiago 30 times back to back to back.
So when people hear Sean describing these huge distances, their first question often is, why on earth did we choose to undertake this journey? Well, our main reason was that we felt like the digital world was taking over our lives and those of our family members. We were spending our days working in front of computers, our nights watching Netflix, and in between we were constantly checking Facebook, Instagram, and email. At the same time, a younger family member was skipping more than 40 days of high school each semester. He was stealing and lying, and eventually he lost his friends, all just to play video games. And in a way, it's no wonder. Studies have shown that the effects of video gaming and social media on the brain are stronger and more addictive than those of drugs like heroin. Even though we were almost constantly connected to Wi-Fi, we were becoming increasingly disconnected from each other, the natural world, and everything that was actually important in our own lives. We realized it was time to begin recharging ourselves and not just our devices, and we wanted to do something a little different. So what did we do? We wanted to get outside and get active, but we weren't particularly athletic people, and we didn't have a lot of extra money. So we focused on the one thing that's free. We figured we could walk. Between 2014 and 2018, step by step, we hiked across Ontario on the Bruce Trail. We ventured across Spain on the Camino Frances. We trekked across France on the Via Pondensis, and soon after that we hiked the length of Portugal on the Camino Portuguese. These were inspiring and life-changing adventures, and the moment each one ended, we eagerly began planning our next one.
While spending our vacation time hiking was fantastic, like many Canadians, we were still spending most of our year in front of screens, dreaming of our next big adventure and planning our next big trip. But digital landscapes are no replacement for real ones. So that was when we realized that getting outside, connecting with nature, and having adventures aren't things that have to happen only once a year. They don't have to occur in far-off countries, or require extensive planning, or even cost a fortune. So instead of trying to cram our entire bucket list of adventures into a few precious vacation days each year, we wanted to find a way to connect with nature on a more regular basis.
Now, nature means different things to different people. I think it's fair to say that most people tend to imagine tracts of pristine, untouched wilderness. Or we might think of national or provincial parks or conservation areas. What many of us tend to overlook is that nature can actually be found everywhere, even in Canada's largest cities. It can be found in green spaces and river corridors. It can be found in the trees outside our windows, in the plants that come up between the cracks in the pavement, in the birds at our feeders, and in our own backyards. There are opportunities to explore and discover everywhere. All we have to do is step outside our doors. This seemingly simple realization is important because if we let ourselves think of nature, adventure, and exploration as something that exists only in pristine wilderness or in some far-off exotic location, the result is that we spend the majority of our time in front of screens, planning or fantasizing about our next big trip, which we may or may not ever have the chance to actually take. On a daily basis, digital landscapes are no replacement for natural ones, and if we lose that connection with the physical world, we eventually lose our curiosity and our desire to explore, learn, and protect nature. That simple idea is ultimately what led us to walk across the second biggest country in the world in the name of conservation, and with the goal of inspiring people of all ages, cultural backgrounds, abilities, genders, orientations, and identities to get outside and connect to nature on a more regular basis through birding.
So what has it been like so far? Well, we started on June 1st, 2019, and we trekked for 165 days and covered just over 3,300 kilometers, crossing from Cape Spear, Newfoundland to Rivière-du-Loup, Quebec. En route, we have seen and experienced some truly amazing things. We've been the first to see the sunrise in North America. We've scaled cliffs on rope ladders, walked on coastal footpaths, seen icebergs and puffins, spent evenings on the sides of crystal clear lakes, gone days in remote wilderness without meeting anyone else, seen caribou, moose, and black bears, as well as over 150 species of birds. We have visited epic national parks, explored provincial reserves, sat in ancient cathedrals, learned about Acadian culture, forded ice-cold rivers, wandered tidal flats, and even wandered into the Atlantic Ocean in a section where the Great Trail was washed out. We've walked on the ocean floor with goats, slept in a haunted jail cell, been actors in local plays, trekked through snow blizzards, sheltered from tropical storms, and survived a hurricane. We've hiked on days in which it was minus 20 and days in which it was plus 45. Along the way, we've also experienced overwhelming generosity, random acts of kindness, and countless words of encouragement. Each day, depending on the weather, terrain, and water availability, we hike an average of between 20 and 25 kilometers on the Great Trail. This number, however, has varied from 5 kilometers along the East Coast Trail in Newfoundland, when we ended up scaling a cliff face on a rope in the midst of a snowstorm, to as much as 50 kilometers one day along the roadways of New Brunswick, when we ran out of water and there seemed to only be endless stretches of private property, and we simply could not stop for the night. We carry everything we need on our backs, and our packs usually weigh between 40 and 50 pounds, depending, of course, on how much food we're carrying. The image you see here reflects approximately what we would carry for 2 people hiking for 7 days without alternatives to resupply. This means that we carry enough to each have 2 packets of oatmeal each morning, along with our tea, and have 2 trail bars each day, and we split a mixture of 2 packets of rice and 1 packet of beans for dinner each night. For our daily routine, each day usually involves us getting up around 6 or 7 a.m., having breakfast, packing up and heading out by about 8 a.m., and hiking until about 5:30 in the evening, at which point we set up our camp, wash our clothes, wash ourselves if possible, make dinner, filter water for the evening and for the next day. And then, around 8 or 9 p.m., about the time you simply want to stop moving and lay down and have a rest, our workday actually begins. It's at this time that we sit down and write our journals, draft and post our daily blog, process photographs, update our social media, and answer emails and inquiries if possible, which typically takes us until about 1 a.m. in the morning. If we're preparing for a presentation or finalizing an article for publication, this time can be pushed even later into the evening. On a few occasions, we've worked right through the night and gone without sleeping. To put this in perspective, in our first year, we soared and edited 139,000 pictures, wrote almost 300 blog entries, averaging 1 entry for every 25 kilometers on the trail covered, and aided in the publication of 54 articles, all while hiking across Canada's beautiful Maritimes. All of this is done on a budget of $20 a day, which means that most of the time we're trekking, we camp, either wild camping on the side of the trail where it's permitted, or in provincial, national, or private campgrounds where available. At times we've been fortunate enough to also be invited into people's homes to rest, get cleaned up, and launder our clothes. Now $20 a day doesn't sound like a lot of money, but spread out over 3 or 4 years it does add up, especially when you consider that these expenses also come on top of the cost of outfitting ourselves, maintaining our gear, switching our camping equipment between the seasons, and replacing out worn-out clothing such as our shoes. This is what the first 165 days of our first year on the Great Trail has generally looked like.
Of course, it has not been all hard work and no fun. It is a beautiful country and it has been well worthwhile. Our cross-country adventure began in Newfoundland, where we were screeched in, kissed a cod, attended a boil-up on the beach, and met some of the friendliest people in Canada. The Great Trail in Newfoundland offers 2 very different experiences along 2 very different routes. The East Coast Trail is a series of 25 footpaths for hikers that traces the rugged coast of the Avalon Peninsula, whereas the Trailway Trail follows the bed of the former provincial railway through the wild, remote, and sparsely populated center of the province. So we began on the East Coast Trail, which in places was steep and rugged, involving rope-assisted climbs and descents, while in other stretches it followed boardwalks, pebble beaches, and pleasant forested pathways. Along the way we saw humpbacked and minke whales, seals, bald eagles, and crystal blue icebergs off the coast. We marveled at towering cliffs and headlands, saw sea stacks emerging out of the mist like something from Lord of the Rings, and watched as water was shot 40 meters into the air by a natural wave-driven geyser. We also walked across a 50-meter suspension bridge and admired the Berry Head Arch. In addition, we visited the famous Cape Spear Lighthouse, which is at the easternmost point in North America, and the colony of Avalon, which was one of the founding European settlements in Canada. Perhaps most impressive of all was seeing North America's largest colony of Atlantic puffins in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve near Bay Bulls. In addition to puffins and eagles, along the East Coast Trail we had a chance to see many other seabird species as well, such as northern gannets, razorbills, black guillemots, and common mures. Amid all of this, we were treated like family by strangers, invited to boil-ups, and enjoyed impromptu kitchen parties along the way.
By comparison, much of the Railway Trail, which crosses the province from east to west, is a gravel track that's used primarily by a thriving and happy community of ATVers and snowmobilers. This trail took us through the remote and spectacular scenery of the Boreal Forest, which was something we had both longed to see. The Boreal covers 60% of Canada's area and provides us with clean air and water. Canada's Boreal Zone is also known as North America's bird nursery. In fact, many of the birds you see in your own neighborhoods and in your own backyards rely on the Boreal. This ecosystem is essential to our survival, yet many of us never get a chance to see it, and that is a shame because it is beautiful. On the Trailway, many of our days began with the sounds of loons on pristine lakes and the sight of the sun rising over bogs filled with wildflowers. We were also privileged to watch a herd of caribou cross the plateau near us, be visited by moose, and discover these two black bears outside of our tent one morning, as well as share the trail with a rare pine marten one afternoon. In terms of birds, we enjoyed species such as the boreal chickadee, Canada jay, ruby-crowned kinglets, pine grosbeak, flycatchers, and countless warblers. As we crossed Newfoundland, most of our adventure was in a beautiful wilderness, but when we reached Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, that changed somewhat.
The Great Trail in Cape Breton and Nova Scotia began right off the ferry terminal in North Sydney, and it took us into the famous Cape Breton Highlands National Park, to the home of Alexander Graham Bell, and along the Celtic shoreline into Nova Scotia. En route, the trail provided panoramic views down the coast, took us through scenic forests, and past important bird areas. One of the highlights for us was the 92-kilometer-long stretch known as the Celtic Shores Trail, which runs along the coast of Cape Breton Island, winding through the communities of Judique, Port Hood, Mabou, and Inverness. Along the way, we found active fishing harbors, pristine beaches, exhilarating views, museums, and quite a few restaurants. We also got to see a huge number of bald eagles around the Brass Door Lake region, as well as seeing a number of different shorebirds, including semi-palmated plovers, least sandpipers, ruddy turnstones, and willets along the shoreline. In addition to all of this, we enjoyed the Celtic music of the Rankin family and savored fresh lobster while watching the sun set in the Atlantic Ocean.
Beyond the culture of Cape Breton, the natural wonders in Nova Scotia were a highlight for us as well. Among our favorites was visiting the Bay of Fundy and getting to see a tidal bore. The Bay of Fundy is home to 16-meter tides, which are the highest in the world. When the tide comes in, it starts to fill all the rivers that naturally flow out into the bay. A tidal bore looks like a wall of water traveling up these rivers, and it occurs at the exact moment when the rivers change direction and begin flowing in the opposite way. In addition to the tides, the vast mudflats that are exposed at low tide are one of the most important stopover points for migrating shorebirds in North America. We visited during the fall and so had the chance to see lots of different species of birds, including the osprey, greater yellowlegs, black-bellied plovers, ringneck pheasants, and wood ducks. This, of course, is only a sampling of the amazing things we saw while in Nova Scotia. Sections of the Great Trail, including the Guysborough Nature Trail, Musquodoboit Harbour, the Cole Harbour and Atlantic Seaview trails throughout the province, also all provide amazing ways not only to see the countryside and let you explore nature, but also enable you to take a cultural journey through Mi'kmaq and Acadian history.
Next on our journey, we ventured across Prince Edward Island, and we would have to say that out of the 3,000 kilometers of Great Trail in the Maritimes provinces, in our opinion, the crown jewel is PEI's 435 kilometers of Confederation Trail. While PEI might be the nation's smallest province, it boasts one of the nicest trail systems that we've encountered yet. The Confederation Trail runs from one tip of the island to the other, forming a complete network of pathways across the province. The entire trail is kept in immaculate condition, and it's composed of extraordinarily well cared for pathways under corridors of shade trees. It features information plaques along the route, distance signage, and shelters for resting, picnicking, or camping along the way. All of these are things we could only dream of on other sections of the Great Trail. The nature of the Confederation Trail, with its beautiful rolling hill scenery, quaint villages, and broad bay seascapes, makes it the perfect means for island-wide exploration. You really couldn't ask for more. In Prince Edward Island, we toured the province from the ferry to the Confederation Bridge, relishing the hospitality of Charlottetown, resting on the red sand of its endless beaches, and enjoying the natural beauty of the island while taking in as much of Green Gables as we could. En route across the province, we also saw a ridiculous number of great blue herons, as well as a variety of forest birds such as common yellowthroats and northern flickers, shorebirds, and of course waterfowl as well. In terms of exploring nature, PEI is a wonder that needs to be experienced.
The next province we visited, and the last one we'll talk about today, was New Brunswick, where we explored Acadian heritage, relaxed in peaceful forests, waded through marshlands while birdwatching, and enjoyed amazing urban trails. If there's one word to describe the Great Trail near Brunswick, it would be diverse. The trail took us from the base of the Confederation Bridge at Cape Girarmain, around the Bay of Fundy, and through pristine coastal wilderness on the famous Fundy footpath. Afterward, we followed roads through rolling forested hills and spent days hiking along the beautiful St. John River. New Brunswick also offers some fantastic urban pathways through its larger cities like St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton. In the university town of Sackville, the Great Trail became a fully accessible boardwalk that took us through a beautiful 55-acre waterfowl park. Here, over 160 species of birds, including double-crested cormorants, American widgeon, northern pintails, hooded mergansers, and white-throated sparrows, as well as 200 species of plants have been reported in the marsh. And even though it was pouring rain when we walked through here, the trail was nonetheless full of people and families out enjoying this beautiful natural space within the city limits. The Riverside Trail in Fredericton was another wonderful example of an urban pathway in New Brunswick. The paved walkway took us along the banks of the St. John River, past beautiful historic estates, and underneath a majestic canopy of old hardwood trees. It took us to some of the capital city's attractions, including the Beaverbrook Art Gallery and the Christchurch Cathedral, and along the way we passed imaginative street art, trail pavilions, and interpretive signs explaining some of the region's history. For all these reasons, the urban trails of New Brunswick, as well as the places they lead to, are an amazing experience.
Now, there is no way to summarize 5 months of hiking across our beautiful country, but hopefully our whirlwind tour has given you an idea of some of the different kinds of experiences Canada's East Coast and the Great Trail have to offer in the Maritimes provinces. We've shown you photos of incredible wilderness and wildlife, and we've shared some of our favorite urban pathways. The reality is, by connecting 15,000 communities across Canada, and by visiting all the provincial capitals, quite a bit of the trail is either in or very close to urban areas. In other words, much of the Great Trail is outside the door of most Canadians, and because of this, it is free, easily accessible, and open to everyone to explore in their own way.
So as Canadians, we have these incredible opportunities to connect with nature, literally in our own backyards, in our own communities, and of course on the Great Trail. We're told all the time that being outside increases our self-esteem and self-awareness, that it reduces the effects of stress and anxiety, it improves our concentration, and fosters creativity and innovation. So why don't we capitalize on the amazing opportunities that are available to us right here where we live and in our own backyards? Well, there are a lot of reasons. There's often a sense that time in nature is non-productive and therefore waste. There's a pervading social fear that being outside is dangerous and that it should be avoided, even before COVID. But it also has to do with the sense that connecting with nature is only possible or worthwhile if we're fully immersed in a pristine wilderness, or that the real outdoor adventure requires us to travel to some far-off and exotic location. And unfortunately, there's also the perception that outdoor activities are something only to be enjoyed by a select few in special locations and at certain times. We've been taught to think that nature is supposed to look a certain way, and that to be outdoors we have to look a certain way or be a certain type of person. But this simply isn't true. Nature is not one special place, and it is not for one special person. Nature is wherever someone is trying to find it. The pursuit of nature and time outdoors is enough to make you a birder, you an explorer, or you an outdoors person. And this is the point we've been trying to emphasize in the communities we trek.
Now, hopefully our talk has done a little to help break down some of the perceived barriers that we might have to getting outside every day. But of course, those aren't even the biggest issues that come into play for most of us on a daily basis, including our children. The biggest issue is, of course, screen time. If given a choice between going outside or playing video games, most children will choose to play games after school, and most adults will gravitate towards spending more time in front of a screen after work than going outside for a walk. Indeed, many youth clubs like the Scouts and Girl Guides, trail organizations, nature groups, and birding associations are finding it challenging to entice younger individuals outdoors, to have an interest in nature and to be curious or explore, largely because such activities take us offline and away from our screens. So how do we break that cycle and get ourselves outdoors more often?
Well, it can be a real challenge, especially since, despite all we've said about the benefits of being out in nature and the effects of technology on us, we like our time on Facebook and Instagram, and most of us spend a lot of time on our phones. So the key isn't to give these things up, it's to find a way to use our phone to explore the world. Most of us already use our cell phones and apps to get outdoors and improve our experiences. Apps like AllTrails help us find local pathways. And of course, geocachers have used their own apps for years to hunt for treasures in the outdoors. So using a free and simple app to identify and learn about nature around you isn't that different. Like geocaching, bird watching and citizen science are simple, fun, and free activities, and together represent the perfect tools to help motivate us to get outside on a regular basis and to bridge the divide between our digital and natural landscapes.
So we are trying to help people do this by reconnecting to nature through birding. When people hear this, their first question often is, why birds? Well, birds are a great way to connect with nature because they're free and fun to watch, and they are literally everywhere. No matter who you are or where you live, whether it's in an apartment or condo tower in the city, somewhere in the suburbs, or way out in the country, it is impossible to go outside your door and not hear or see at least one bird. And if you think I'm kidding, I challenge you to prove me wrong. And birds aren't just in nature. They appear on our stamps, our currency, on the logos of our sports teams, in our video games, and in our art. Almost everyone has a memory of the sound of a bird calling, whether it's the sound of loons up at the cottage or the scream of a red-tailed hawk from a movie. Most people are actually already closet birders, which means that birds are pretty much the perfect gateway species to connecting with nature and other wildlife. And more than that, birds are a great way to connect with nature because they need our help. According to the State of Canada's Bird Report, some groups of birds are doing very well, like waterfowl and birds of prey. And actually those two groups represent a really nice example of how widespread conservation efforts across North America have made a huge difference to helping birds rebound and thrive. Other groups, like grassland birds and aerial insectivores, which are birds that feed on flying insects, are not doing so well, and they need our help. So, where do we begin? Well, the first step is to learn your birds, and one of the best places to begin is right in your own backyard. If you don't already know who regularly comes to visit, start by learning the names and habits of those birds. Figure out things like what time of year do they visit? What types of food do they like to eat? What do they sound like? If there are some species that look the same, like little small brown birds, try to identify some markings or features that you might be able to use to tell them apart. Like maybe one of them might have a white eye ring, and another might have a striped head. Perhaps one is blue or red or yellow, or it might even have stripes. Another great place to begin learning your birds is to visit a local important bird area. An important bird area is pretty much exactly what the name says. It's an area that's important to birds. This can be because it supports a high diversity of different species, or it can be because it has habitat for a rare or endangered bird, or because it's used as a stopover site for migrating birds that need to rest and refuel. There are over 10,000 IBAs around the world, and over 600 of them are here in Canada. Ontario is home to 72 important bird areas, and if we get a chance to walk all the branches of the Great Trail in Ontario, we will walk within 20 kilometers of 26 of them. Many of the IBAs that are located around the Great Lakes, such as the ones at Long Point, Point Pelee, and around the Hamilton region, are important for migrating birds, both songbirds and waterfowl. So these sites are a great place to visit during the spring and fall to see and learn about a wide variety of different bird species. Once you start to learn your birds, or if you already know them, a great way to help birds is to become a citizen scientist. A citizen scientist is anyone who makes observations about birds or nature and then reports them online to help scientists understand how our wildlife populations are doing. This is great because it means anyone can do it, whether you're 5 years old or 95, whether you're an amateur or you have a PhD, as long as you love going outside, finding really cool things, and learning how to identify what they are, you can be a citizen scientist. Choosing to become part of the citizen science community is not only fun, it also makes a huge difference to conservation. Without the millions of observations that have been submitted by people just like us, there is no way that a few scientists would be able to monitor the health of all our wildlife populations in the area the size of one of our provinces, let alone all of Canada or North America. Birds and wildlife need our help, and in order to understand which populations are thriving and which are not, scientists are increasingly using data collected by citizen scientists. There are several free apps that you can use to not only learn about birds, but also to submit your observations to become a citizen scientist. One of the ones that we most often use and recommend to others is called iNaturalist. iNaturalist is great because it is very simple to use. You take a photo of something in the natural world and upload it to the app. You will then be presented with a series of photos you can compare your own with to help you identify what you just took a picture of. Once you've made your ID, your observation will be submitted and you will then get confirmation from the community of experts. So now you've not only shared your photo with others, but you've also turned it into highly valuable data that can be used by scientists. The other great thing about iNaturalist is that you can submit observations of almost anything in the natural world. Birds, butterflies and other insects, bats, reptiles, mammals, trees and flowers, whatever you're interested in, this app will work with it. In addition, the app also keeps track of your observations, so you can build a life list of all the species you've seen and where you saw them. If you use the Seek version of the app, which is really fun for kids, you'll be invited to enter different challenges, and as you build up your collection of species, you'll start to earn badges for different achievements. For anyone with kids who play video games, or if you play video games yourself, this might start to sound pretty familiar. You travel around collecting things, you complete various challenges, you compete with your friends, and you earn achievements. Citizen science is a lot like video gaming, which is what many of us love to do already, but there are some very important differences. It gets you outside and being active, it teaches you about birds and other wildlife, and it helps you connect with the natural world. Citizen science also makes a huge contribution to conservation, from your own backyard to the boreal. Birds and citizen science are a great way to bridge the divide between our digital world and the natural one, and they are the perfect tool to make exploration and outdoor adventure part of our everyday routines.
In addition to being a citizen scientist, however, there are a number of easy ways all of us can help birds. These include buying bird-friendly products, which can be things like local or organic produce, bird-friendly coffee, or items that limit the use of single-use plastics. Another way to help is by keeping our cats indoors, since predation by domestic cats is a huge source of mortality for wild birds. Similarly, if you're a dog owner, keeping your dogs on a leash on beaches during migration and breeding season would be a huge help. We can also help by making our backyards and houses bird-friendly, planting shrubs and bushes that provide shelter, native plants that provide seed and nectar, and leaving some brush over winter can all improve the value of your property and help birds. Next, trying to help prevent window collisions by adding window decals that help break up the reflections on glass, which helps birds see that it's not just more sky and that it's a building. Finally, turning our lights out at night can do a world of good for birds. Bright lights at night can confuse night migrating birds, so especially during the spring and fall periods, close your curtains and blinds and turn off unneeded lights out in your yard. Each of these are simple steps which any of us can take and together have a huge positive impact for birds in our backyards and our communities.
The wonderful thing is, when you help birds, your actions have a positive impact beyond your own backyard, your own community, and even your own country. Many bird species are migratory, which means that every spring they fly north to breed in parts of Canada, and every fall they return to the southern US and parts of Central and South America to overwinter. This means that many of the birds we see in our own backyards and work hard to protect locally rely on other habitats as well as the ones where we observe them. In Canada, the boreal forest is one key example of an essential habitat that's particularly important for many birds. It's known as Canada's bird nursery because over 300 species breed there, and it accounts for the well-being of between 3 and 5 billion birds. This means that any actions we take in our own backyards and communities have a profound impact on conservation efforts across the continent and help bird species from coast to coast to coast. It means that our backyards are connected to the boreal, and so if you are putting up a bird feeder or a bird bath in your own area, you're having an impact that extends well beyond your own backyard. Our goal is, of course, to be back out on the Great Trail by the summer of 2020. So if you'd like to follow our hike through our blog, Facebook, or Instagram, the links are on the screen right now, and we hope that you will take the opportunity to follow along as we continue our hike for birds over the coming 3 years. If you have any questions, you can contact us online or by email, and we will do our best to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for that amazing presentation. It was so informative and really inspiring to get out. And being from Newfoundland, it was really nice to see a little bit of my home province featured as well. So with that, we welcome everyone to submit their questions into the chat bar if you have any questions for Sonia and Sean, which I'm sure most of you must have some kind of question after that onslaught of amazing information. So I welcome you to put your questions in the chat bar. We have one already. So Sonia and Sean, if you, I'll turn this over to you so people don't have to hear me rambling on. And if you want to read out the question and then answer it, that would be amazing if that works for you folks.
Okay, the first question we see is, what type of camera did you use? That's a good question. I took several of them after having an incident with my first one. And that way I didn't have to change lenses. So I have several lenses and several camera bodies, but good question. Does anyone else have a question?
What are the must-have skills for multi-day hikes? Well, that's a really good question. What did you just do to that? I guess perhaps the most important one is determination. Over a long, I guess, yeah, if you like hiking, I would say start out by doing short hikes and sort of build up longer and longer. I don't know, do you have any suggestions for important skills?
I think starting local and slowly building up the weight you're carrying in your backpack really helps. Even we were surprised. There is a big difference between going for daily hikes and multi-day hikes. And usually around day 4, you want to give up. But once you get through those little hurdles, you're pretty much okay. But starting local certainly helps, especially if you have nice trails like in the Guelph region.
There was another question. What was your favorite bird? That's a really good question and a really hard one to answer because I love birds and I love all of them. I guess two of our favorite things, or two of my favorite things, one of them was seeing the colony of Atlantic puffins, Newfoundland. Just seeing tens of thousands of puffins like in the air and sort of face planting into the ocean and all over the place. Puffins are just endearing little birds and I love them. That was definitely one of the highlights. Another one was seeing a great horned owl on the trail in Nova Scotia. Love owls, and for whatever reason, we don't generally get to see very many. Exciting. One morning we just gotten up really early and we were heading out down the trail. It was just getting light and we saw this huge great horned owl just kind of perched on the side of the trail, and then he was flying down the trail in front of us. That was probably one of my favorite moments. Another question we had was, do we have photos of plants. Yes, we do. I guess we didn't include a lot of them in this presentation, but as we hike, we use iNaturalist a lot. I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear sort of the part of the presentation that was on iNaturalist. We were losing it a little bit, but we use iNaturalist a lot, and we take a lot of photos of wildflowers and moss and all kinds of cool stuff that we don't know what it is. I don't know what a lot of plants are, so I use iNaturalist to find out, and then I tend to post quite a few pictures of plants and pine cones and stuff that we've just discovered what it is, and we think it's cool. So we do try to share not just birds, but mammals and plants and turtles and
frogs.
All the cool stuff we see. We try to share as much of that as we can. A lot of it through Facebook and Instagram, and I guess on our blog as well sometimes.
One of the questions is, are there camping sites along the Great Trail? That's a good question. It varies from place to place. In Newfoundland, you're allowed to wild camp, so you don't necessarily have to go to campsites. You just kind of pull off the trail and make sure you're not in anyone's way, and you're perfectly fine to camp. In other areas, no, there aren't, which leads to 50 and 60 kilometer days very, very quickly when you're trying to be as legal as possible. Nova Scotia was a real challenge for this, as was Cape Breton. On the other hand, places like Prince Edward Island and the part of Quebec we did, which yes, there are certainly campsites and camp platforms and taps beside the trail and shelters built. It's really incredible. So it varies from place to place. This year, we're fortunate because if we get to walk in Quebec, we hope the system we've seen so far continues along, but we've been in the region in Ontario, it'll be a real challenge. The stretch from Peterborough to Toronto back up to Barrie is very much urbanized, and that will be challenging. So there are not campsites there. The next question is, how do you arrange local support, do laundry and do groceries? That's a good practical question. Oftentimes people are following along with us, and so they see that we're going to be in town in a couple days and they reach out and talk to us. In terms of doing laundry, we have a small collapsible bucket we take, and we often use biodegradable soap flakes, Sea to Summit soap flakes, which have very low impact. And we do laundry at the side of the trail and then dump our gray water away from water areas. In terms of groceries, we're really fortunate because it means one of us can stay with our bags outside and the other one can go inside. This year, that will change a little bit. We don't want to put a stress on local communities, so we're going to be shipping our food forward in boxes and doing less grocery shopping and relying on our advanced preparations, I hope.
Another question I'm seeing here is, in Whitby, we have a nature reserve, which is about 12 kilometers off the trail, but would be good for a community or media event. Community events subject to COVID gathering restrictions. How far off the trail do you go to hold an event? This may sound bad to say, but that depends a little bit on how much help we have. 12 kilometers off the trail is great. If we can get a ride from someone, that makes us always very happy when things are off the trail. We'd totally be happy to do that. And this year in particular, we're offering virtual presentations just because a lot of events are subject to COVID restrictions. So like this one, we're happy to do a virtual event. We can do that basically anywhere as long as we can get an internet connection, and we can take care of that along the trail. Thank you for the question. That is very helpful for us.
The next question we have is, when are you on the trail now or this year? Announced that we were going to do Southwestern Ontario in April, and then COVID locked everything down. And in particular, of the 3 trail systems Ontario absolutely closed, Norfolk and Windsor's Essex, the 2 ends of the Southwestern Ontario stretch, shut down. So we've waited and waited and waited until things have loosened up a bit. And I believe the Premier of Quebec announced the other day that on May 4th, a lot of things are opening up. And by May 11th, Montreal will open up. So our hope is to return to the trail by May 15th in Quebec City, which means we'll miss a very small part in Quebec, but we hope to get back to it. And we'll be continuing then probably until November or so, which I guess ties into the next question is, do you hike the trail year-round? And the answer to that is no. We made a mistake and learned very quickly in Newfoundland when we walked into a blizzard that was not going to be one of our strengths. and we struggled to get to Rivière-du-Loup. When we left Fredericton, it was 20 degrees and it was beautiful and sunny. And if you could see us today, we have shorts on and t-shirts, and that's pretty much the extent of clothing we have on us because of weight. And we got into Rivière-du-Loup in about -20 3 days later. So we stop in the hard winter periods, mostly to recharge. We had lost a lot of weight last year and to catch up with everything, but also to earn some money in the winter season as well and get back on top of things.
So we have another question. Do you have a map available of routes and trail connections? So we have a map on our web page which shows sort of where we've hiked and when and where we think we're going to be. So it's sort of a projected itinerary that shows specifically what we're doing. There's also a map of the Great Trail online that you can just type in Great Trail and explore the trail, and you can see where the trail goes a whole country. There is a really nice chunk in Guelph. It runs right along the Speed River. There's a trail pavilion there and everything. It's a gorgeous section, I hear. We haven't been there on this hike yet, but we are looking forward to it. So you can check Great Trail website and kind of see all the different sections of trail.
The next question we have is, how do you charge your equipment? Which is a really good. Through hikers do everything they can to get their weight as low as possible. You begin to look at toothbrushes and go, is that too much weight? You look at 2 pairs of socks and go, do I really need 2 pairs? We did that, and then we had to change course because, of course, we carry a laptop to do these sorts of presentations and to do the blog. We have several cameras on us. This year we have a drone on us. So your question comes into play, how do you charge your equipment? The reality is I carry about 5 to 10 pounds in battery packs in my backpack, which any through hiker will tell you is a little bit crazy and a little bit painful at times. So we have battery packs on us that will last us about a week to 10 days, at which point we actually do have to get into a hotel or sit in Tim Hortons a very long period of time and plug in and recharge. But yes, to keep this all going, recharging our equipment is one of the top challenges we have. We've looked at solar panels and everything else, and I think come next year in the prairies, we'll probably be going that route.
So what is the rarest bird you have seen? I guess the answer to that is probably a Ross's goose that we saw on the side of the Great Trail in Tilsonburg, I think it was, when we were doing a training hike, getting ready to go to Newfoundland. And that was rare because they don't usually hang out in that area, I think. Most of the birds we see are not rare. It's a fantastic way to bird the country, but part of what we face in terms of seeing rare birds is we sort of walk through an area we're there once. We don't necessarily know what would be there or what would be, where to look for it. So we run into things as we find them, and that's super exciting for us. We love it, but it's not necessarily a good recipe for seeing like rare or special birds that would be considered rare for local people, I guess. So that is a good question.
The next question we have is, what are some essential pieces of gear and some non-essential pieces of gear you originally thought were essential? Yeah, I suppose the tent, certainly. We're a bit extravagant. We don't have a 2-person, a 3-person tent, just because once you start living in a tent for 160 days, you want a little bit more room. So that is a bit essential, I think, for us. We have a thermarest because after 40 kilometers, and these are all extra pieces of weight, but you really, really, really hurt. Beyond that, books and journals. We originally thought we would be very old-fashioned and write out our journal every day and sketch the trail, and that very quickly joined the fire pit one day when we were in a private campground. You discover very quickly you don't really need to read at night or read off out of a book or keep a journal every night.
I guess we had a hard copy bird guide, or Sibley's bird guide, that we thought was going to be like essential. We very quickly converted to identifying things online. All about birds, and eBird and iNaturalist were our friends, and they didn't weigh any more than the phone. I think probably one of my most essential pieces of equipment was the bug net, especially in Newfoundland during June. The insect net for your head.
I suppose the water filter as well was essential.
Yeah.
I think the biggest change we went through is that we walked the East Coast Trail with an MSR Featherlight stove, but then you have canisters. And so now you have to find a place to dispose of those canisters, and that becomes dead weight, and it's a lot of waste. So we switched away from having a stove with canisters and went to a wood burning stove. So we collect twigs or whatever and have a very small contained fire in a little small stove. So that was probably their biggest equipment switch, I think, during this year.
Yeah, I would think so. So the next question is, what drove you to take on the Great Trail? That is a very good question and doesn't have a simple answer, but I guess we started hiking on Ontario's Bruce Trail, and we sort of did that as day hikes and end-to-ends, and we did the peninsula section as a through hike, and we discovered that we really liked long distance hiking, and then we did longer treks in Europe. We walked across France and Spain and Portugal. And when we were over there, one of the most frequent questions people were asking us was like, you're from Canada. It's got all this wilderness. It's like one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Why are you walking in Europe? Why aren't you walking in your own country? And we really started thinking about it, and we were like, well, why aren't we? And then we came back, and in 2017, there was this big announcement that the Great Trail had just been officially connected. So it's like a sign, we have to do this. So we started seriously considering, how long is it going to take, and what parts of it would we do, and how would we do this, and can we actually put our careers on hold and donate all our stuff, and can we do this? And we just decided, sure, let's go for it. Let's have the adventure.
I think we also got tired of working at desks and paying out most of our money into bills. We found that, paying for the house, mortgage, insurance, car, gas, et cetera, just got overwhelming, and you wound up working to pay into something that you weren't really seeing the end of. And so backing away from that and trying something new was also a driving factor. It's the question everyone asks, and we don't really have a clean answer to. Thank you. Did we miss any questions? They scroll by very quickly on us, so.
Yeah.
Someone asked, where are you on the trail now?
We're not on the trail right at the moment. We finished up house sitting about 3 weeks ago, and we were forced into staying in the region while everyone was locked down. But we're hoping to get on a train or a plane on May 15th and go to Quebec City.
To Rivière-du-Loup, which is of Quebec City, but that region is still really locked down and really being affected by COVID. And there's also about 10 feet of snow, we're told, up in the Charlevoix Valley region. So we will try to come back to that later. We're hoping that we can start in Quebec City in the next couple of weeks or so, and come back to the chunk we missed.
What's our anticipated end point for this year? That's a good question. If we get to start on May 15th, we hope to get into Manitoba this year. That would be a big goal, which would let us then finish the east-west part next year. But hopefully get through Quebec and Ontario.
Yeah.
When do you think we'll pass through Peterborough and Lindsay? I guess June, July?
Probably beginning of July, maybe beginning or middle of July.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, if everything goes according to plan. We do put out blog posts, and we sort of have the itinerary on our website. So if you're following along, you can probably keep track of us through the blog.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess is the best bet. I think we imagine we'll be there mid-July, but of course there are many things that can affect how fast we go, and what happens with COVID and all that also will affect, what we may have to stop again. We just don't know. We're hoping we can get on the trail and go.
Our estimates are also based on about 25 kilometers a day, which winds up being the average, but that could change this year as well. Last year we had 40 and 50 pound backpacks on us, and we'll have our backpacks this year, but we're moving some of that weight because of some of the physical problems we had from that. We're moving some of it into a pull cart this year. So we may be able to go further, longer. We'll have to see. We don't want to rush through anything, but yeah, we'll have to see. Does anyone else have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. Last call for questions. Otherwise, we will wrap it up. Seeing nothing. Okay, well, with that, I want to extend a huge thank you again to both of you, Sonia and Sean, and of course to Nature Guelph as well for helping us host this event and kind of bringing you guys on board. I think this was a fantastic event and a really great topic. I was really excited once I saw what was going to be happening. So it was it's so nice to hear you guys talk about it. I'm sure everyone would join me in wishing you very, very happy trails. And I hope you don't hit too many roadblocks this summer and you can make it all the way to Manitoba. That's an amazing accomplishment and huge goal that is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you again. Phenomenal talk. Thanks to everyone who joined us. And please check out the 2Rivers Festival website for more events. Nature Guelph is going to be hosting several more with us throughout the next 2. Yes, I echo Judy in saying thanks for saving our bird event. This is fantastic, and it was really lovely to hear about your journey and all of your reasons for taking on the Great Trail and what an endeavor that is.